welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to finally be filming this video. I am now almost 5 weeks postpartum. It has been a crazy, emotional but beautiful almost 5 weeks of being a mum, and I am excited to share my laboured story with you guys, and eventually I will make another video to my 6-week postpartum as well. So let's just get into it. So I have some notes on my phone that I'll be referring to because a lot happened on the day of my labour and the week leading up to it, so bear with me and I will get through it as quickly and as efficiently as I can. The last pregnancy update I did, I was 39 weeks pregnant. I did want to do a 40-week pregnancy update and a 41-week pregnancy update, but by then I was beyond exhausted and just didn't really have the energy or the time to get myself ready and film a video, so I will just quickly brush over the last 2 weeks leading up to my labour. So in saying that, I didn't actually give birth until 41 weeks on the dot. Pretty much from my 39-week update to 41 weeks, nothing really changed. I had pretty much the same symptoms. I had really bad reflux, really bad circulation, but it all came to an end on the 14th of December 2017. So today is the 15th of January 2018. So my baby boy Maxwell is 1 month and 1 day old today. So I had my 40-week appointment at the hospital, and I was told that baby boy's head was engaged and he was sitting very low. He was measuring right on time, so there was no dramas at all, but there was no signs that labour was coming anytime soon. So the doctors did talk to me a little bit about being induced in the following week or early the week after, and that would be a decision that we'd have to make in the next few days or my 41-week appointment. A week passed and absolutely nothing happened. We did try, when I say we, me and my husband tried everything under the sun to induce labour naturally, and I mean everything. I googled and Pinterested everything I could and nothing seemed to work. I even ran up and down my stairs out the front of my house, drank pineapple juice, bounced on the exercise ball, did star jumps, did squats, was sitting differently all the time, having sex, everything you can think of, and nothing seemed to bring my labour on. So 41 weeks came around and I went to my appointment at 41 weeks. I'm just referring to my notes to see what happened at 41 weeks. So at my 41-week appointment, the doctors did what's called a stretch and sweep. So you can Google it if you like, but I'll give you a little bit of an explanation. It's where they go inside you and they sweep around the membranes, and it's meant to just sort of release a hormone in your body to bring on labour. It doesn't work all the time. I think there's about a 30% chance that it works. That might not be a very accurate or detailed description, but if you do want to know what a stretch and sweep is, Google definitely lets you know. Hoping that the stretch and sweep brought on labour that night and I would go into labour naturally. However, I went to sleep on Wednesday night and woke up Thursday morning and was not in labour at all. So 7 o'clock we got up, got ready, and we had to be at the hospital by 7:30 to be induced by 8 a.m. At this point, we hadn't told any of our families that we were being induced or friends, because they told us that my inducement might not be successful, and we have family that live 6 hours away. So if we told them that I was being induced, they would have wanted to come out that day, and if my labour wasn't successful, then it would have been a waste of a trip, and who knows when I would have been induced again or when he would have been born. So we didn't tell anybody until later on in the day when the doctor said you're officially in labour. So that comes to the inducement. So what they did to induce me, they inserted prostaglandin gel. Sorry, I have to look at my phone for that. So the gel is, it contains the hormone that starts the contractions and just kicks off labour really. So it's not too complicated at all, and your body just reacts to the gel and it just creates labour straight away. So there are a couple of risks with being induced no matter what way they do it. But with the gel, you can get what's called hyperactive uterus contractions. So that's when the contractions are just so intense, so full on straight away, one after each other. And if that's the case, then they have to stop labour. They give you a tablet and they rinse out your gel and labour stops. That didn't happen with me. So about half an hour after the gel was inserted, contractions started. They started pretty normal, pretty bearable after about 2 hours. So after 2 hours of contracting and being in labour, they can't rinse out the gel, it's already done its thing, and they can't stop labour, so they just have to keep monitoring you. When you're induced, you have to be forever monitored. You have to be on a machine so they can monitor baby and monitor you. I was constantly hooked up to a machine, and for the first 2 hours of my labour, I had chronic back pain, and I'm talking, I was in agony when I had a contraction because of my back. It didn't hurt my uterus, it didn't hurt the front, it just hurt my back so badly, and I couldn't bear it anymore, but I didn't want to have any gas or any medical interventions. I think I mentioned in my 38-week update my thoughts on labour and what I hoped would happen. Obviously, my labour went completely left field, and yeah, didn't exactly go how I wanted it to. Because I didn't want any sort of medical intervention or anything unnatural sort of interfering with anything, I had what's called sterile water injections. So this is something I hadn't ever heard of. I did speak to a midwife back when I was 12 weeks pregnant who briefly brought it up, and since then I've never heard of it again. The midwife that I had on the day is amazing. Absolutely amazing. I couldn't fault her. She's actually from a small town called Mitchell, and she works up in Roma, but for the day that I was in labour, and I think for a little while she's working here in St. George. So I was so very lucky to have her, especially for the first half of the day. I think she left at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So she and another midwife that she showed how to do it, because no one else at the hospital had ever done it, performed sterile water injections on my back. So what that entails is 4 needles. So near the dimples at your back, there's like 4 little spots that they pick, and they put in sterile water just underneath the skin to shock the nerves, and it is the most excruciating needle or injection that I have ever experienced in my life. It's about 40 to 60 seconds of stinging pain, and the midwife said it was like a wasp sting, and it is nothing like a wasp sting. It is 1,000 times worse, and yes, maybe other women can deal with it better than I did, but I sat there in agony for about 40 seconds and it was excruciating. However, after those 40 seconds had passed and I had my next contraction, I had 0 back pain. Absolutely no back pain. And my contractions just felt like a little bit of period cramping or something like that. It was nothing compared to what I'd been feeling for the last 2 hours. And it was like, oh, you know, my labour, I was like, yeah, it's painful, yeah, it's intense, but this is nothing compared to what I've been feeling. So they lasted about 2 to 3 hours for pain management. After that, they actually got the machine to work with the wireless Dopplers, so I could move around the room and sit on the exercise ball and walk around and stuff, which helped so much. Being on that hospital bed and just having to lay there was probably what was causing my back pain to be so bad, because I could not move around and everything was just cramping and tightening up, and it was awful. But anyway, so after about 3 hours of labouring, I did start to experience hyperuterus contractions. My contractions were about 2 minutes, and then I would have about 10 to 20 seconds break, and then I would get another contraction, and that would last for at least 10 minutes, and then I might get a 5-minute break, and then it would start again. So I was just copping contractions all the time, and they were so painful, and I was so exhausted, and I just wasn't getting a break between them. So they just had to monitor me. They couldn't do anything about it. Bub was super happy. His heart rate stayed really, really good. He didn't seem stressed at all. I coped okay, so they just let it continue, and yeah. So the next thing was 2 o'clock came around and I had my cervix checked. So this was seeing how far I had progressed in labour. So the doctor had checked it and told me that I was 1 to 2 centimetres dilated, and my cervix was really soft, but it was still facing backwards. So he did tell me at this point not to be disheartened. I know that I hadn't made much progress. I hadn't dilated really at all. In the morning, my cervix was completely closed. So I had dilated 1 to 2 centimetres, but you're not really in labour until you're about 4 centimetres dilated. But Reese and I figured I'd already been labouring since 8:30 that morning, so we should probably tell our parents, because I think within the next 24 hours my son will be born and we need to let them know. So we told our parents around that time that we had been induced and we were hoping that he would be born sometime within the next 12 hours. So I continued to labour, and the next check was done at 6 p.m. I actually have a video that I recorded. I'm not sure whether it was before 6 or after 6, but I recorded it while I was having a contraction. It was a really mild contraction that I was having, so I figured, you know, I should record and explain to you guys what contractions feel like, because I know that was one specific thing that I googled so much to find out in my last couple of weeks of pregnancy, is what does a contraction feel like. I did experience Braxton Hicks, which is sort of practice contractions where your uterus tightens and then releases, but there's no pain and there's no progress being made. So I really wanted to know what a real contraction felt like, and really couldn't find a specific answer. So I tried my best to answer this as specifically as I could, and I recorded it as I had a contraction. So hopefully that information that I actually haven't watched that video over, but I will put the clip in here and let you guys know.
So something I always wondered before labour was what a contraction feels like, and I feel like there is no better time to describe how a contraction feels than right before one or right after one or during one. So I am getting a contraction starting right now. So it's in my back a little bit too. I'm getting a bit of back pain, but it is just the front of my stomach, probably a few centimeters up from my belly button, coming together from the sides and tensing really hard. And it sort of comes up a little bit more. Might have to breathe through it a little bit. And then I can feel it pushing really hard downwards. So I feel this really intense downwards pressure. And it's not so much painful as it is a lot of pressure and uncomfortableness. So yeah, that's my description on a contraction. And then once it sort of fizzles out, it's really just like really low pelvic pain. So I have had pelvic cramps and I've had really bad menstrual period cramps, and it's similar to that. Probably not as bad as I've experienced before, but just, you know, constantly getting them can weigh somebody out very quickly. Maybe other women might describe a contraction a little differently, but yeah, I researched so much about what a contraction feels like because I was obviously so hypersensitive about my body and what it was doing leading up to this point. So yeah, I thought it might be a good insight to let you know as it's happening.
So as I was saying, 6 o'clock my next check came around, and again the doctor did a cervix check, and they said to me before they did the check, if you haven't dilated or progressed any further from here, we might have to talk about other options to get this baby out. The doctor asked me my thoughts on an epidural and my thoughts on a C-section, and I said to him, last resort, I do not want an epidural whatsoever. If I can avoid that completely, I will. C-section, definitely not on my cards. Definitely didn't want to have a C-section, but we'll see what happens. So they checked me at 6 p.m. and I was 1 to 2 centimeters dilated. My cervix was really soft, but it was still facing backwards. So because my cervix was facing back, they couldn't even reach up to break my waters, so they couldn't help my labour progress any more than what it was. The doctors did say there must be a reason why your cervix isn't dilating enough. His head might not be pushing down on your cervix. There's something going on. There's a reason you're not progressing. We'll let you progress for the next couple of hours, see if anything changes. If not, we're seriously going to have to consider a different option. So obviously that was emotional. I think Reese and I definitely cried plenty that day. It was emotional, it was disheartening, it was crazy but exciting too, because I knew that very soon I'd be meeting my son. Like, I never forgot the end result. I never forgot that, you know, through all of this, no matter what happens, he will be born and I will have a son. So I think that's what kept my spirits high and yeah, kept me going. 8:30 came along and they did the check, and they didn't really have to be in there for very long to know that I had not progressed at all. So they said to me that his head was transverse, So he was head down, he was in a good position, but to actually come out, his head had to be looking up like this, but his chin was to his chest, which is a transverse. So he was sort of looking up at me if I looked down at my stomach. They thought that was the case, and his head wasn't pushing down on my cervix, which was why it wasn't dilating, which is why my labour didn't progress. So I was given 3 options. So there is a chance that his head might move into the right position and I might start progressing. If I continue to labour throughout the night, he might be born tomorrow at 9 o'clock, which was another 12-13 hours. The next option was to have an epidural overnight, which would give me some rest, but it might actually stop my labour, so I would have to be reinduced on the following Monday. Or I opt for the C-section now. I was also told that sort of no matter what route I took, I would probably have to end up with a C-section because of not progressing for these 12 hours. As they said earlier, there's a reason why I'm not progressing. It's either his position or his size or something with me. There's a reason nothing's happening, and therefore I probably will need a C-section no matter what route I take. After plenty of deliberation, plenty of conversations with the doctor, reasoning behind all the options we were given, Reese and I decided that we would get a C-section. So it was so crazy. As soon as we said to the doctor that we've decided on a C-section, he was just like, okay, yep, let's go. Like, I'll call the other doctors, I'll call the midwives, we'll get you your spinal put in, we'll get you in your gown, and everything just started moving so rapidly. It was so scary. And then I realised we haven't even told our parents that we're about to have our baby. So I asked the midwives, can we have just 5 minutes to call our parents and sort of collect ourselves, because as soon as we said those words, it was like full throttle, everything was happening so quickly, and it was really, really overwhelming. So we called our parents. They were obviously sort of nervous, scared, but excited for us. They all said that it sort of felt like Christmas as a kid. None of them could sleep because they knew that this baby was going to be born and they were coming out to town tomorrow and to meet him, and it was all very exciting but scary and crazy and emotional and beautiful all at the same time. I was on the bed, they got me in my gown, they put the spinal in, and they rolled me into the theatre. Reese was getting his scrubs on. They don't let your partner see you get the spinal. I guess it's just for their sake of mind. So yeah, I remember laying on the table, everything sort of went fuzzy and numb. Weirdest sensation. I'm not sure. I know you can get an epidural for a C-section, and an epidural and a spinal are 2 different things. So I had a spinal injection, which was the weirdest feeling. I could feel everything. If somebody poked me on my leg, I would feel it, but there was no pain. It was sort of just like tingling sort of feeling, and yeah, I could feel them, the poking and the prodding and the pulling. I could feel everything, but there was just no pain, which was absolutely crazy. And then, you know, Reese was sitting next to me, and I had one doctor behind me sort of reassuring me what's going on, talking me through the progress so I know where we're at. And I had 2 doctors performing the surgery with tons of midwives and nurses all around. They told me that getting the baby out takes about 5 minutes, and then putting me back together takes about 45 minutes. So I remember laying on the table. I remember doctor telling me that, yep, they're opening you up, they're making the incision. They actually make 2 incisions, which makes sense now, thinking back to it. I definitely didn't think that they would have to make 2 incisions, but they cut your skin and then they have to cut your uterus. So there is 2 separate incisions. I remember 5 minutes had passed, and I knew that it had been longer than 5 minutes, and I was starting to freak out a little bit, and I asked the doctor what's going on. And he told me that I have an extra stomach muscle that less than 10% of the entire population have. And it's one of those things that has just sort of disappeared through generations and through evolution. And a lot of people just don't have this stomach muscle anymore. And some people do. So it caught the doctors off guard that they had to go through a different muscle than what they used to on C-sections. So that was why it was taking a little bit longer. And then once they, got into the uterus and they could see baby and they were trying to get him out, his head was too big to come out of the incision. So they had to use forceps to get his head out, which are like tongs really that go around his head, and they just help to get him out. So that is crazy, and the doctor had said to me that he has done that no more than 5 times in his career of C-sections. And it was just the pure fact of he had a really big head and I'm a small person, and he didn't want to make the incision any bigger, so forceps did the trick. And I remember the feeling, I remember the nurse pushing really hard underneath my chest, and I remember that release when he came out, and they held him up over the sheets and I could see his, you know, private parts. And when a baby boy is born, their private parts are so swollen and big. It's like the first thing you see when they pick him up and show you. So I was glad that he was definitely a boy. And then they went and did all his measurements, then they wrapped him up and they brought him over to Reese and I, and we got to meet him. And the minute they put him down next to me, 100% my husband's mini-me. He looks exactly like my husband. It's kind of scary. He has changed a little bit now, but yeah, newborn definitely looked like my husband. The nurses actually had Reese's phone, which was really good because they got some really nice photos and videos of him when he was born. So I might put them in here now and show you guys the moment he was born. The spinal started to wear off, and when the spinal starts to wear off, I got really itchy and everything was pins and needles. You know when your hand goes numb and you start to move it and it gets pins and needles in it? That was my, you know, pretty much my whole body, and I was so itchy and I had the shakes really bad. So all the nurses were trying to put these hot blankets on me because I was shaking and they thought I was cold. And although it was relaxing, it definitely didn't help the shakes. That was just something that I had after getting the spinal. Once the spinal started to wear off, the pain definitely kicked in. It was a very uncomfortable pain, and it was definitely as though I'd had major abdominal surgery. So I remember laying in bed, I don't remember what time it was, and I was asking for some sort of pain relief, and they kept giving me, I think they gave me morphine. Reese laughs when he thinks about me when I had that morphine, because I was just apparently really inquisitive to the nurses and asking really weird, stupid questions. I don't remember that at all. I remember the morphine kicking in, and I remember the pain sort of subsiding, but not really. And then they kept giving me a couple of other things, and nothing was really doing the trick. And then they finally gave me endone. Thank the Lord for endone, because that was the only thing that relieved enough pain for me to actually get some sleep. And by this time, I think it was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I just fed Maxwell. I am breastfeeding, so yeah, I think I went to sleep about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I was up by 6 because Max was hungry again. So I'd only had about 1 hour sleep the night that he was born. And after labouring for 12 hours, going through surgery, having the spinal wear off, and then, yeah, being in pain, I was beyond exhausted. I think I have a photo of me, and it was taken at about 10 to 4 in the morning, and it's me laying with Maxwell in the bassinet, and I will put that up now to show you guys just how tired and exhausted I was. This is a very raw image. I look absolutely wrecked, but that's labour, that's childbirth. Some women can go through it like magical creatures, and some women go through it like me, and that's completely fine. Okay, so I just realised that I didn't even share any details on Maxwell when he was born, so I would go grab him now and show you guys, but he is sleeping, and the last thing I want to do is wake him up right now. So I will put a photo up so you guys can see a couple of his newborn photos, and I'll explain the details. So he was 57 centimetres long, which is absolutely crazy. The national average for the length of babies is 51.7 centimetres. So he was way above average and really long and lanky. He was 4,020 grams, or £8 and 14 ounces, which is only 1 ounce off 9 pounds. So he was pretty much a 9-pound baby. or a 4 kilo baby, depending what you guys go by. His head circumference was 36.5 centimeters, which is also above average, but definitely not too big, although his head was definitely too big to come out of me, as I explained earlier. Now Maxwell is obviously 1 month old, so as of Friday he was 5.4 kilos, which means that he has gained almost 1.5 kilos since birth. In their first week of life, they actually lose a little bit of weight because they're only drinking a tiny little bit of colostrum, and then finally the breast milk comes in, which is what makes them gain the weight. So he only lost about 400 grams in the first week. So he has gained that back plus another 1.4 kilos. So he's almost gained 2 kilos since his first week of being here. And that's pretty much it for Maxwell updates. He is doing great. He is feeding great. He is thriving. He's developing every single day, doing new things. He smiled for us for the first time the other day, which definitely wasn't a gas smile. And yeah, he is doing absolutely wonderful. So I will definitely share more updates with Maxwell as well with you guys, and I myself can't wait to look back on these videos in a couple of years and see how it all started and where he was when he was a baby boy. So I will introduce you guys to him in the next video, definitely not in the middle of a nap, maybe when he's awake and happy and not hungry. So I will see you guys then.